Okay, well, it's a minute after 4, so let's just go ahead and get this started. Thank you all for attending today and showing interest in the Tavistock Wastewater Treatment Plant Class EA project. My name is Jamie Young. I am a project engineer at Oxford County, and I'm the county's project manager. As you may have noticed, your mic and camera have been disabled for this evening, but we welcome comments through the chat feature, which you should be able to access through the top tab of the Teams window. I will note that the presentation is being recorded just for note-keeping purposes. And I think with that, I'll pass things over to our engineering consultant, Austin Bender from RV Anderson.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. So yeah, we will get underway here. So I'm trusting everybody can see my screen here. If you don't, or if you're having audio troubles, just please drop a note in the chat. Try to get that sorted out. Right. So as Jamie mentioned, this is being recorded. The chat button looks like this if you haven't seen it before. You can disregard this piece about the QA button. It doesn't seem to be working at this moment. So outline for this afternoon, we're going to start with a presentation by myself regarding the project. After that, we're going to move into a question and answer period. So if you do have a question, I encourage you to write it down and hold it until we get to the end, just to make sure that we make it through the content, and then we can move into that question and answer period. Following the presentation, we will create a summary of those question and answers to be available afterwards. And then if you do have any ongoing or kind of other follow-up questions afterwards, we ask that you provide comments specific to this PCC by December 19th. It's not definitely a limit to when you can provide comments on this project. At any time, you can provide comments through the county's Speak Up Oxford website, but just to help keep things straight, we'd like comments specific to this PCC by the 19th. So the purpose of this meeting is, as it is the first public consultation center, is to introduce you to the meeting. We're going to provide an overview of where the study is to date and the work that's been done. We're going to identify the needs or the reasons behind the study, and we're going to provide a summary of the alternative solutions that have been considered, as well as the preferred solution at this point. So as I mentioned before, we do want to hear from you. We want to hear if you have observations, definitely questions and about the study or the whole Class E process as a whole. So to start things off, we're going to go over what the actual class environmental assessment process is. So the class environmental assessment, or you'll hear it referred to as the Class EA process, is a planning process that's followed by municipalities in Ontario when we're planning for new infrastructure. So that could be roads, pumping stations, wastewater treatment plants, and it provides a bit of a way for us to get public, technical agency, Indigenous community, consultation and input into the project. And so it occurs in 5 stages, which you will see here. So this particular study is being completed in what's known as a Schedule C Class EA, with a 25-year look at the wastewater treatment plants. You may have heard of other schedules, like Schedule C Schedule B are often used for less impactful projects like pumping stations. So as I mentioned, it's a 5-phase process here, and we're currently in phase 2. So phase 1 is developing the problem and opportunity statement, and in a couple slides we'll go over what that is. Once that's been complete, we move into phase 2, where we do background studies to quantify kind of the natural, the environmental, and social kind of environment. We identify and review potential alternatives to solve the problem at hand. We do an evaluation of those, identify a recommended solution, and then we come to the red box here, which is PCC number 1, where we consult with the public, agencies, and Indigenous communities, and that's what we're doing tonight. Following this, we take back the comments we've heard, and we move into phase number 3, which is the development of alternative designs. So the phase 2 is alternative solution, so more of a high level piece, whereas phase 3, we hone in on that and provide alternative actual designs. Again, go through the evaluation process, come up with a preliminary preferred design, and then we will convene again for another PCC, which will occur here. So you can look forward to that in the future. Following that, we'll finalize what the preferred design is. We will summarize all of our consultation and work to date in what's called an environmental study report, or an ESR. And that ESR will be filed for public review by various agencies and communities, as well as available to the public for a 30-day review period. And once that's complete, we'll move into finally phase 5, which would be the actual design and construction. That's kind of outside the realm of this project, but that's how this flows here. So who has input into the Class EA process? As you can see, there's many different stakeholders within the process here. Going across, we have provincial and federal ministries and agencies. So an example of that would be some folks like the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks in Ontario. We have internal and external technical advisory committees. This is something that's kind of specific to Oxford County. We have internal committees made up of different members within the county, so not just the wastewater department, but other members as well, so that we get input from across the county. The external technical advisory committee is a committee that's made up of various external parties external to the county, and they could include folks like the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, folks from East Zorra-Tavistock Township in there. We have municipal elected and local agencies, Indigenous groups, utilities, as well as residents and the general public, which is kind of what we're doing here tonight. So with that bit of background here, we're going to move into the actual problem and opportunity statement at hand. So the purpose of this particular project is to identify the preferred approach that's cost-effective, environmentally sound, and sustainable to increase wastewater treatment capacity at the Tavistock Wastewater Treatment Plant to service the existing sewage flows, as well as future growth to 2046 in the Village of Tavistock. So this is Tavistock here, and we have the treatment plant kind of in the southeastern quadrant over here. The study area is shown the dotted line here, the dotted red line. So Tavistock has a current estimated population of just under 4,000 people, estimated in 2025. The treatment plant was originally constructed in 1960, consisting of these two lagoons here. 1989, they added this third lagoon, and then again in 2011, the fourth lagoon and the sand filters were added on. And there was another minor kind of equipment upgrade that happened recently in 2021. The plant currently receives an average daily flow, or you may see it referred to in the presentation as an ADF, of just over 2,000 cubic meters per day, and that's about 70% of the capacity right now. We zoom in a little bit on the plant and how it actually works. Though the wastewater treatment plant is a lagoon-based treatment plant, it is different than some other lagoon systems that you may have come across at other municipalities. Sometimes lagoons can be systems where they're simply a vessel for holding wastewater. The wastewater is allowed to sit for a while and then discharged periodically. At the Tavistock treatment plant, there's actually several unit processes that work together to treat the raw wastewater. So influent, so that's the raw wastewater, enters here into cell number 1, and cell 1 and 2 are aerated. And that provides oxygen to allow biological removal of organic material. And at the same time, heavier pieces of solids actually settle out and are slowly decomposed over time. At the same time, chemical phosphorus removal is also occurs, so that alum is injected into the raw wastewater. It combines with phosphorus, and so it allows it to also be settled out. From cell 2, wastewater then can flow into cell number 3, which is primarily used mostly as a storage lagoon. Some supplemental treatment may occur here just because it is a large lagoon. There is oxygen available that can diffuse from the atmosphere, but mostly it's kind of a storage thing. And from that point on, wastewater is passed through to the sand filters, the ISFs, which are shown here, these 4 square pieces. Essentially, they're a sand bed with kind of a couple of layers of media that the wastewater is sprayed on top, percolates through the bed. It's collected by an underdrain system, and then it's either sent to the outfall, or it can be stored in cell number 4. And so the key piece, or the key purpose, I should say, of the sand filters here is to provide what's called nitrification or nitrogen removal. Bacteria live in the sand and they consume the nitrogen as it passes through. And so that's the purpose of these filters here. They also do provide a measure of suspended solids removal too. You can see here various arrows. The county does have some opportunities. There's lots of flexibility provided with this setup. Wastewater can be drawn from various lagoons and put to different ones, which gives them a good degree of flexibility. And one of the reasons that is important at this particular plant is because this plant has a quantity restriction on the effluent. So different times of the year, the plant is allowed to deposit different amounts of effluent to the receiver. And so sometimes in the summer, we'll get to this in a couple of slides, the level of wastewater leaving the plant is lower than what's coming in. And so that's why we have some storage available here. So during the summer, we're able to store that kind of extra, and then it can be released during the colder months. The final process here is the outfall, which is kind of shown here. It enters the Honer drain. The Honer drain runs kind of south and a little bit west in this picture here, and intersects with the Thames River. So along that same line of where does the effluent go? So as I mentioned, effluent is discharged eventually to the Thames River after passing through the Honer drain. The Tavistock Wastewater Treatment Plant, it is required to meet effluent quality and quantity, as I mentioned, limits that are set out in the Facilities Environment Compliance Approval, or ECA, that are shown here in this table below. They have to meet these limits, and they use their best efforts to meet these objectives. You can see they're slightly lower. You can also want to note that these limits change different parts of the year, offering some slightly higher limits in the cold weather periods, and then more stringent limits in the warm weather periods. Following a review of the effluent data for the past number of years, the treatment plant consistently produces high quality effluent that does meet the ECA limits. So if we start to look ahead a little bit to the future, the residential population of Tavistock is estimated to grow by about 1,500 people by the year 2046. So that will drive, along with it, commercial, industrial, institutional growth. So all of that together means essentially more wastewater. So RVA completed growth projections to estimate the resulting future wastewater flows. And it's estimated that influent flows will reach around 3,905 cubic meters per day by the year 2046. And so that represents about 33% more flow than what the treat plant current capacity is here. These values down here, these are some of the design values that we've came up for that future. The average daily flow is what we're going to mainly talk about today, because that's really the main thing that we're talking about, the size of a treatment plant. But some pieces of the treatment plant sometimes require sizing to a slightly higher flow to handle very short duration, like peaks. Another piece of work that was completed to date is a capacity assessment of the existing treatment plant. So we reviewed each of the unit processes within the treatment plant to determine what its capacity is. We looked at it based on its current capacity and also looked forward to the future to see which portions of that would be suitable if it had to receive additional capacity. So if we look here, the first part of the table here, if we look at the rated capacity, based on the average conditions, we find it to be suitable for looking at the aeration system. However, it was determined that based on max month loading, so that's in a year, there will be a month that has higher than the average loadings, that the aeration system was slightly undersized for those max month conditions. If we look towards the future rated flows, we find that essentially all components of the plant would require some sort of upgrade to be able to handle that flow. The one that potentially would be suitably sized is the amount of storage. That's really dependent on the future effluent discharge limits. There's actually a slide discussing that coming up. I'm going to talk a little bit about here the field investigations that have been completed so far and what are kind of undergoing at this moment. So we're completing these field investigations to review the natural, cultural, social, and economic resources kind of in the study area so that the impacts can be minimized. We've completed to date the Thames River assimilative capacity study. And again, we'll discuss that in a couple of slides here in more detail. We've completed a species at risk study for the project area along the Honer Drain and Thames here. A stage 1 archaeological study as well as a cultural heritage study are currently ongoing right now. The archaeological study should be wrapping up in the near future. And finally, we also completed a hydraulic capacity assessment of the Honer Drain itself here. So the natural environment in the particular area. So what you see here is Tavistock and it's kind of its location within the watershed. So the red line here is the watershed boundary of the upper Thames River. And so where Tavistock is located kind of right in the headwaters here, you can see the South Thames, the south branch of the Thames River. It flows down this way off to the corner of the page, heads through Innerkip and Woodstock, and eventually makes its way to London, where it meets up with the north branch of the Thames. In terms of the actual treatment plant location, you can see the study area here, the dotted line. The one piece to note here is there is a section of a forest here that's kind of in the lower corner of the treatment plant. So RVA's terrestrial ecology team came up to site a few times. We conducted a breeding bird study 2 times a year, I believe spring and summer, as well as a terrestrial assessment. The lagoons themselves, they support a variety of migratory shorebirds, semi-palmated sandpiper, plover. I know that when I've been on site, I've seen lots of ducks and geese and herons making use of the lagoons. As I mentioned, there's also a mature forest and swamp. A portion of that is actually located within the plant's property boundary, and they host a diverse section of plants and wildlife. Through our study, we determined that they're the locations of 2 species at risk, according to the Environmental Species at Risk Act. One of them is the eastern wood pewee, which is a small bird, and that was noted by some of our birding staff within this mature forest here. And then the other one was the location of a couple of butternut trees, which were growing in one of the fence rows. Taking a look at the aquatic side of things, again, some of RVA's aquatic staff visited the site, again, in spring and summer to do an assessment. Take a look at the pictures here on the right-hand side. This is the outfall head wall here of the plant. So this is effluent coming out, and then this is the Honer drain. You're looking downstream. If you followed that, you'd eventually get to the Thames River here. And then if you turned around and you look upstream, this is the new culvert that was installed, and this is Moonstone Drive here. So the Honer drain is a municipal drain, but it is classified as a Class E municipal drain, which means that there may be sensitive fish present. And so that really means that if there did need to be work happening in the drain, there would be a spring restriction on any work like that. Our review found that there's the potential presence of the northern sunfish, which is a species of special concern. And we were able to confirm that fathead minnow, creek chub, black-nosed dace, and brook stickleback are found in these creek. And last thing to note here about the aquatic environment is that there were some iron staining noted within the drain here, and that suggests that there's some sort of groundwater input into this particular drain. If we continue along talking about the receiver, we can talk about the receiver assimilative capacity study, referred to as an ACS. And so this was completed in conjunction with RVA subconsultant Greenland. Excuse me. So the purpose of an assimilative capacity study is to determine the receiver's ability to assimilate effluent into it. And really the key outcome of that is what kind of effluent limits are required. So we conducted a water quality sampling campaign. We sampled it Thames River kind of upstream and downstream of the treatment process. And we were also able to combine that data with a mix of historical data that was available on the Thames River at a couple of different spots, going back quite a ways. So with that information, we were able to propose effluent quantity, which we're going to talk about on the next slide, and effluent quality limits and objectives were also proposed. The proposed limits are yet to be approved by the MECP. We have another meeting set up with them in the near future where we'll be able to confirm those. But at this time, the actual limits show a reduction in the amount of loading to the Thames. So despite the fact that we would be putting more effluent volume into the Thames, we would actually see less mass. That's shown here. You can see the proposed limit versus what the current ECA permits here. And just for clarity here, BOD stands for biological oxygen demand, and so that's a kind of a measure of organics within the wastewater, talking about how much oxygen effluent can consume or would require to kind of break down. TSS stands for total suspended solids, so that's the particles that are actually in the wastewater. TANS, total ammonia nitrogen, so that's ammonia, and TP stands for total phosphorus. And so these are kilograms per year. Looking at the quantity side of things, this is the amount of effluent that the plant would be able to be discharged in a given day in a specific month. So over here, you can see the gray bars. That is what the plant is currently allowed to. So you can see in the month of here we're in December. So every day in the month of December, the plant is allowed to discharge 4,000 cubic meters per day. And the idea behind this, you can see this kind of curving shape, is that more wastewater is discharged during the cold weather months. And that's kind of to be able to kind of mirror the flows that are occurring in the Thames. We see higher flows during the winter time, especially during the spring melt and thaw, and then we see lower flows going into the summertime here. The proposed discharge limits, again, this will be yet to be confirmed by the MECP. We iterated that a bunch of times to make sure we're meeting the receiver water quality. So when we're putting effluent into the Thames, we're making sure that we're still meeting the water quality objectives for that mixed water. Well, we also are trying to reduce the storage requirements here. You can see the dark blue columns. Those are the proposed limits or proposed effluent limits. You can see that perhaps unsurprisingly that most months will require an increased flow to the receiver. And that's just because we would be planning to see more influent coming into the plant. So we need to correspondingly have more effluent leaving the plant. Otherwise we'll end up with a surplus. Actually, I'm going to just mention we don't have a slide particularly for it, but I just wanted to mention here because it goes along with this. We recently completed, as it was noted, the Honer drain hydraulic study. And so that was to determine what if and what kind of impacts there might be from increase. You can see these higher flows here. And so it was determined that in the Honer drain that those increased flows are pretty minor compared to the flows that you would see during a storm in that drain. But that is something we did want to check, make sure. So with some of that background information, we'll move forward into looking at the different alternatives that were considered as a part of this. Starting at the top here with the do nothing option, pretty straightforward, keeping the plants as is. Number 2 is limiting growth so that the growth, the wastewater associated with that growth doesn't exceed the capacity of the plant. And so both alternatives 1 and 2, they don't meet the problem statement. And so they are not going to be considered any further in this particular discussion here. Alternative 3 is reducing wastewater flows through water efficiency and extraneous flows. And so that can be preventing things like stormwater getting into your sewer system, and because we don't want to be treating what is essentially clean water. Alternative 3 can't provide enough additional capacity to support the additional growth. However, it will be implemented by the county as part of any servicing solution. Alternative number 4 is upgrading the plant to what's known as a partial mechanical system on the existing site. And number 5 is decommissioning the existing lagoon-based system to some extent and constructing a mechanical plant on the existing site. Both alternatives 4 and 5 are deemed to be feasible solutions, and so they are going to be reviewed and evaluated in detail in the next couple of slides here. The final solution is decommissioning of the existing lagoon-based system and then constructing a new plant on a new site somewhere else. And so at this time, that would have very significant financial and environmental costs. There would be lots of new construction, and making a greenfield site would obviously have some additional environmental impacts. And so at this time, this particular alternative won't be considered further in this presentation. So let's talk more about the feasible alternatives. So we'll start with number 4. So alternative number 4 would include upgrading the existing lagoons. So that would include an aeration upgrade here. And most critically, it would involve the addition of a nitrification process that would follow after the 2 main treatment treatment lagoons here. We've shown one kind of taking up a quarter of the lagoon here. Other embodiments that could take up a portion of the sand filters down here. But the critical piece is that we require a process that can remove ammonia in the winter. Right now, the current sand filters, when we start to get weather like we're seeing today, essentially freeze, and so they're not available until the springtime. And so that system was designed to operate from roughly March or April through kind of November. But to be able to get the treatment levels that we require here throughout the year, we would require something that nitrifies kind of around the year. The other piece that would be required is a new tertiary filtration process, essentially, to some extent, operating kind of like the sand filters here. We're just seeking to get out any fine particles that are left in, as well as that helps us reduce the amount of phosphorus. the effluent. And then finally, the current plant doesn't have a disinfection process, and so that would be required as a part of this upgrade, some sort of disinfection. There's several options available. Maybe it would be something like a ultraviolet disinfection. It's a pretty common one. But so this, in general, that's what we're looking at here for alternative 4. Alternative 5 is the construction of a new mechanical wastewater treatment plant. And so we would likely construct something in the area of the sand filters down here, or potentially partially in one of these kind of fields here. And we repurpose the existing lagoons kind of again in their current fashion as storing effluent, so that we're able to meet those effluent quantity limits. So this is just one embodiment of a mechanical treatment plant, which is known as a conventional activated sludge plant, quite common in Ontario. Various other embodiments that could be selected if this is the chosen alternative here. You can notice there'll be new tankage, concrete tankage that's constructed, clarifiers for the removal of solids and sludge, aeration tanks for kind of completing that biological treatment. And then similar to the alternative 4, we would need some sort of tertiary filtration process, most likely, as well as disinfection. Of notable difference here, because a mechanical plant has kind of a lot more going on with it here. There would be a control building for staff, as well as some sort of sludge management process on site. Those are the two alternatives at a high level here. We'll move into how they're actually evaluated. So the team came up with 4 broad criteria, which you can see on the left here: technical, financial, environmental, and social. And so each of those criteria were broke down into sub-criteria, and we have most of them listed. There's a couple of other ones here they couldn't fit all on the slide. There was quite a few. And so for each one of these sub-criteria, we developed a weighting for each of them. And we also developed a scoring. So what's considered, a high score versus a low score. We did that as a team. And then we went through, and for each one of the alternatives, we went through and scored each one of these sub-criteria. And then the product of the score times the weighting, you sum that up, and then we can determine what's the preferred alternative here. So just as a high level, go over a couple of these options. Things that were considered were constructability and construction impacts. So the ability of that system we need to be able to treat wastewater while we're completing construction. So seeing how that would work, that kind of ties into the second one of phasing. The compatibility or optimization of the existing infrastructure that's on site. The operation and maintenance level requirements. They're different for these two plants. A partial mechanical facility has a lower operational maintenance requirement than obviously a mechanical plant would. And then technical abilities of the ability to meet the flows required, the anticipated discharge limits, as well as resiliency and adaptability to kind of as things change in the future. From a financial aspect, things like life cycle costs, obviously capital costs and O&M costs were considered, as well as funding opportunities. From an environmental perspective, the impacts to regulated areas, so those are areas that are governed by the Conservation Authority, as well as impacts to species at risk or significant wildlife habitats, impacts to those terrestrial and aquatic environments, as well as climate change resiliency, but also things like greenhouse gas emissions were considered here. And then from a social point of view, the ability of the system to accommodate flows out to the planning horizon, impacts on local residents and businesses, and those can include things like aesthetic impacts, odor impacts, noise and dust during operation, but also kind of during construction. and impacts to archaeological and heritage resources, as well as impacts to Indigenous communities. So when we put that all together, when we complete the weighting here, you can see this is a condensed breakdown here. So out of a total 100 points, once we complete the weighting and the scoring here, we get the overall summit was determined that alternative 4 here what had the highest score and is therefore the most preferred, which brings us to our preferred option here, which is alternative number 4. A partial mechanical upgrade has been deemed to be the most cost-effective, environmentally sound, and sustainable approach to servicing the Tavistock community and meeting the wastewater servicing needs out to 2046. So next steps. We are going to continue some of our ongoing field investigations. We are going to be meeting with MECP to review and confirm the effluent requirements for the expanding wastewater treatment plant. This is a critical piece because it will be very important when we start to undertake phase 3, which is actually developing alternative design concepts. And so phase 3, we will take that alternative number 4 and break it down into design options, and then follow through with another evaluation process. And then we'll meet back here again for PCC number 2, where we will show the alternatives, the concepts, and the preliminary preferred design. So once that's completed, we'll confirm the preferred design concept. We'll move to phase 4, producing that environmental study report, the ESR, and then that will be submitted again for public review. And following that 30-day review period, we'll finalize the Class EA. So we've reached the end of the presentation here. I want to say thank you again for spending your Wednesday night or your Wednesday afternoon here with us. We do appreciate getting feedback, and so there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. In a second here, we're going to move into the question period, and so I'll ask, we'll do that through the chat function, and so we'll try to get those questions answered. The other way is on Oxford's Speak Up page, and so if you signed up for this meeting, on the exact same page, there's a comment feature there, so you can receive comments that way. And you can also feel free to reach out to one of us directly. Our emails are also on that page, so you can send comments through. Again, if you have comments specific to this PCC, we'd like it by December 19th. But again, this isn't a hard limit on comments in general on this project. At any time throughout the project, you are available to send comments through Speak Up Oxford or send an email. The last thing I'll say is, if you like this, we're doing the same thing tomorrow night in Tavistock at Memorial Hall. And so you're welcome to come again, and we can do this in person. Okay. So Jamie, that's the presentation here. I guess we can move into the question and answer period.
Thank you, Austin. One of the first questions that we got, which I've already answered, is whether or not the PowerPoint will be available. We'll be posting that to the Speak Up Oxford page. I believe in the right-hand side, there's a list of all the documents associated with the project, so that will get posted either tonight or tomorrow, I think, at the latest. So if you're curious, you didn't need to take screenshots of things, you can go to the Speak Up Oxford page and download that.
Yep.
And then first question is, do we have high-level costs for each of these alternatives?
So yes, we do. We do have a high-level cost. So for alternative 4, so that's the partial mechanical upgrade. At this time, it's estimated to be around $20 to $25 million for that kind of upgrade. For a full mechanical upgrade, the estimate for that one is in the neighborhood of $40 to $45 million. So there's quite a spread. Obviously, through the next phase of things, as we actually get into specific design concepts, that high level cost will be refined slightly more.
And then a question as to whether or not the lagoons are required to remain in service regardless of the alternative.
Yes, so if we go back to our conversation about the quantity limits, we would require some sort of effluent equalization. It's our understanding from the ministry at this time that some form of effluent equalization would be required regardless. So in the case of alternative 5, where we construct a mechanical plant, we would be still storing that effluent for a portion of the year within some or all, potentially all of the lagoons, depending on the quantities we're looking at.
And would that be for the mechanical treatment? Would that be pre or post processing?
So for the mechanical treatment, I will say that it could be both. Both options have some benefits. If it's before the plant, it gives some opportunity to equalize influent flows. That's one of the really nice things about a lagoon. You have a large volume, and so you can handle a short duration peak flow. But most likely, even if one lagoon was chosen for that, it's most likely that the most of them would be for effluent. We would treat the wastewater as it comes in and store that effluent, so we have clean effluent that's ready to be discharged for those cold weather periods.
If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Can RVA/Oxford County speak to the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant as it relates to new construction/infill development projects at this time? Limits on number of units.
So Jamie, I would put that to the county to comment on that.
I don't have a great answer for you right now off the top of my head. I don't know if with Jesse Keith being on the line. Jesse, do you have any additional insight on that?
Hi everyone. Can you hear me, Jamie?
Yep.
Good.
Yeah. Just again, off the top of my head, I don't believe if the question pertains to like restrictions on current proposed development projects. Generally speaking, I don't think there really is any constraints at this time. Not to be complicated, but the only exception there would be we do have a sewage pumping station that we're currently working on the design for, the William Street sewage pumping station. So there could be restrictions if a development were to drain to that specific sewage pumping station. So there may be some restrictions there. But Jamie, you're familiar with that project because you're working on it. I hope that provides some context. Other than that, I'm not aware of anything, and we can take this offline as well, then just review that with our water wastewater team to ensure that what I'm stating is somewhat accurate. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll certainly note down the question and provide hopefully an answer with a little bit more detail in the Q&A response. Is the plan to fund this via developers or will it be charged to existing users via rate increases and supplemental charges? The short answer is that it's impossible to say with any certainty right now, trying to look that far into the future. The rates are set annually as part of the business plan and budget cycle, and it you know, the process for setting the rates incorporates projected growth, financial sustainability, etc. Dawn? Yeah.
Yeah,
You
let
go
me
ahead,
jump
Don.
in there because this project is in our development charges study, and so growth, the growth that's going to be, is going to be contributing to this project. That's for certain. There is some, you know, benefit to existing. If there's new pumps in the pump station that Jesse was referring to, that where it, increases the lifespan, there might be some benefit to existing, but a lot of this is for growth. Also, in terms of the capacity of the Tavistock lagoons, there is a lot of allocated capacity already. We are total allocated capacity at 88%. So this is the trigger for looking at the expansion, because it may be, as in the earlier slide you saw, 69% was the actual flow going through the plant. The capacity was the flow through the plant, but there's a lot of already dedicated, committed capacity that takes up a lot more of the capacity of that lagoon. So that's the trigger. That's why we're looking to expand. It is for growth, and it is in the development charges study. So as is a portion of the sewage pumping station. So.
Thanks, Don. Ruben, did you want to jump in here as well?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, and thanks, Austin, for that presentation. It was very well done. Just adding to what Don said, I maybe if we can add that to the Speak Up Oxford as well, we can take that question back and talk to corporate services and maybe answer in a little more detail as to the breakout with respect to how much is picked up by DCs and how much is picked up by benefit to existing. And maybe it would be good to have that for tomorrow as well in the in-person, that answer to that question. Thank you.
So I believe this was scheduled until 6 o'clock. Certainly happy to hang around until 6 if questions keep flowing in. By all means, if you feel like your questions have been answered and you're satisfied, feel free to drop off the call at any time. You don't need to stick around to the end. I'll reiterate any of the questions we got today. We'll take them in, including the questions that we get tomorrow at the in-person PCC. We will put them all into a Q&A document, and that will be uploaded to the Speak Up Oxford page as well. So don't feel like you're going to miss out on anything. think that that probably wraps it just about up.
Um,
Should we go ahead and call it here?
that's probably okay. I guess if somebody joins the meeting and we have it off, I think we'll get a notification. Is that right, Jamie? We can always
I believe so. Yeah.
hop back on if need be.
I think it's safe to do so, Jamie. You're probably safe at this point. In addition to that, you know, we got the meeting tomorrow as well, so in person as well. I think you're probably safe to do so.
Okay. Thank you all for your time. I will see some of you in person tomorrow, I'm sure. Probably not all of you, but yeah, thanks for your time. Have a good night and a safe drive home for those of you who still have to commute.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jamie.
Jamie, we'll
Thanks,
see you
Jamie.
tomorrow.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.